Hi guys, welcome back. It's G-Man, My World 67. I'm out in the shop and hadn't been able to get out here for the last couple of days, but I did finish that American Flyer, little American Flyer steam engine that I was working on as last the video that was shown. And so I wanted to share that with you. I got it out here, brought it out here with me. It is finished, complete. And I wanted to run it for you and just show it to you. But before we run it, I want you to take a look at it. There it is. Now this is American Flyer shell, 1933. I couldn't remember the number on this shell or for this shell, and it's a I believe it was a 617 or a 618. I believe the 618 had another dome right here, and this is the 16, which made this the first one and the earliest one. See, we can get a little better focus there. Okay, and it already had the light socket in it, so I wired the light up to the motor. This is this motor is out of a Marx 490, and it's one of the newer Marx motors, probably 1960s. As in the 70s motors, towards the end of the 60s, they went to the brackets that stick through the frame, through the shell, and this had the screws that went through the bracket up on the top side of the motor. And so this was one of those motors with the screw-in bracket. But I took the bracket off of this motor when I put it in this engine because the bracket on this for this would not work. But I used the space that the bracket went into to drill this hole into the shell and go through the motor itself. Then I realized that there was a little slack in that space because the area where the brackets sat is in kind of a box shape, small rectangular or a box shape, and it was actually bigger around than the screw, so the screw would latch on it and it wouldn't fall out, but the motor would move up and down and side to side a little bit. So I figured out to make a bushing, and I don't know whether you can see it or not, but there it is right there. I made a bushing to put in that slot to take the slack out, the screw. And then I had a thick straw, like a sipping straw, and I cut it the same width, a little wider than the chassis, and the screw set right down through the straw. And I took that and that piece of styrene channel that you see, that's what the white is that you're looking at, and I glued them together and then glued them in place in the slot on the bottom side of the slot so that it would keep the motor lifted up and be level when you put the screw back in. And then I also hot glued it in place, so it's actually connected to the motor, a part of the motor, and you can actually remove the screw, put the screw in and out, and it goes directly into that bushing or that spacer and locks the motor in. On the back side, of course, I made the rear lock-in motor mount out of aluminum, and That's just thin siding aluminum, guys. It's nothing special, just a piece of scrap aluminum. Just cut it the size and the shape you need it, wherever you need it, and it doesn't cost you anything, and it works to do whatever you need it to do. I did double the end of it that goes into the motor. It's very thin, and so I doubled the end of it so that it'd be a lot sturdier. Stronger. And that's about it. I hooked the light up. The light housing came with the shell, was already in place, and this is a micro motor, Marx micro motor, and they're not lighted. And so I went ahead and I took that wire for the light housing and hooked it to the contactor. And then this, I don't know whether you can see it or not, but this copper strip right here that runs down off of this rear axle, it grounds the chassis, the motor itself, to the shell by way of contact with this rear plate. Works perfectly. That was actually, that brass strip was actually Marx's invention, and they did it for those plastic shells. Okay, we're gonna set this camera down for a moment. Now I'll let you see this engine run. That's about 30 amps of power. Set it back to 20. And we have a problem with this switch over here. Trains don't always want to go through it. This little engine really runs. I had cut it down to 20 amps of power, but I need to cut it back a little further. That's about 10, 15. And anyway, as you can see, my track problems are pretty much solved except for that switch. cut this down just a little more. It really runs. That's even a better motor than I thought it was. I had to put a brush and a brush spring in it and clean the contacts really good on it. Clean the armature. Those crossovers and switches is where I have the biggest problems. And that's because those Marx wheels on the drive wheel side are so wide. But as you can see, it really does go. How many cars will it pull? I have no idea yet, but we will be finding out. Now, this motor just runs one way, so it does not reverse, but it doesn't have to reverse. The original engines, the first ones they did not reverse either, and then they put a manual reverse on them, and I might do that later on. Put a manual, a switch on the engine. But I kind of like it just like it is. I don't plan to be running a switching operation, actually a true switching operation with that engine. So it should be okay just like it is. I'm going to get a tender for it. I'm going to build a tender for it, or modify a tender for it. As you can see, this has the peg coupler, and so I'm going to leave that because it is original. And I've got a couple ideas that I can use differently for that, or I can just use the peg. As you can see, the peg will fit into a knuckle coupler, and as long as that coupler doesn't open, theoretically anyway, it should pull the engine. Now, what I think happened was it opened. Yeah, it did. And every time I set it in there, it opens it. And I think that's because of the type of coupler this is. This has the manual release on it. I don't know whether you can see that on the side or not. So every time I set it down in there, it pushes against it and it releases it. But anyway, I'm going to fix a tender for it. And the next time you see it, hopefully it'll be running around the layout and we'll be pulling some cars with it. Alright, that's all I have for you for now. As you can see, I've got everything cleared back off. The track work is, I hope, finished, except with the exception, like I said, of those switches. Once in a while I have a little problem with them. But the track is running great. I'm still going to put in over in this tunnel area. I get some time. Hopefully this week I'm going to go in and put in an extension power line so that I can have some more power through the main line here as it runs through the track, through the tunnel. Because over in the tunnel on that side, in the tunnel back there, that long stretch, the main line loses power. So we're going to boost that. And then I've got this area here, which is another area I've always had trouble with, even from the very first one we put the layout down. And 3 years ago, when I built the layout 3-4 years ago, the main line again here, right through here, and I've taken out track, I've put in track, and of course we put in the old 34 track, which this is not one of. This is an old 27 because we had to rearrange the track again to get it wide enough to support what we were trying to do this time. And but for some reason here, over in here, it still dies down a little bit when the train comes around it. But again, we're just going to take and run a wire over to that and get some extra power to it. Okay, well, that's all I have for you today, or at least right now. As always, thanks for watching, and happy rails until I see you next time.